Almost anything can be found on the internet. Whether it be lighthearted debates over which fictional characters should be together, forums from 15 years ago helping players in video games today, or an endless archive of YouTube videos completely lost to this world, to more dubious websites where any fictional character you think of has Rule 34 drawn of them, or forums dedicated to disturbing films, to the downright dangerous, where in the deepest recesses of the internet we find forums detailing cannibals who wish to find their next meal, or pages dedicated to talking individuals into suicide. Serial Experiments Lain first aired on TV Tokyo in 1998, directed by Ryotaro Nakamura and written by Chiaki J. Konaka. Konaka had a long-term fascination with horror and the relationship between viewer and author. From a young age, he was fascinated with novels such as The Exorcist, Alice in Wonderland, and Hell House, all of which influenced future supernatural novels in Konaka's work. Konaka's first introduction to technology was a Macintosh he got to write with. From there, it undoubtedly sparked his fascination with technology. We can look at his other work, such as Alice in Cyberland and Malice at Doll, the latter being a fascinatingly weird early CG show. Malice at Doll and Lain further form Konaka's fascinations, as they share similar themes of self-actualization, erasing oneself from the world, and technological horror. All of these facets of Konaka explain how Lain ended up where it is. Konaka's views on horror are contrasting compared to many other horror directors, seeking to dive deep into why the audience asked to be scared. Konaka chooses to explore themes of horror not through blood and gore, but through psychological themes, leaving the viewer to think about the existential concepts introduced to us, and the true horror that stems from them.
Recap.
Now that we understand a little bit more about who wrote the story, I feel it's best to recap the story for both those who've seen it and haven't. Serial Experiments Lain follows a unique young girl named Lain, who lives with her closed-off mother, computer-obsessed father, and teenage sister. In this world, computers connect to a place known as the Wired, which is the series stand-in for the internet. Lain is mostly uninterested in the Wired, until she receives an email from a student who recently committed suicide, Chisa Yamoda. This email details the reasons for Chisa's suicide, that being to shed her physical self to live in the Wired under a god she has found there. From here, the series reaches more supernatural levels, which I'll attempt to recap to the best of my abilities. The Wired itself is a long-distance communication method that is created by the real-world phenomenon known as the Schumann resonance, in which wavelengths resonate at an extremely low electromagnetic frequency, allowing for such things as lightning to resonate around the globe, which can be used to track weather patterns. In Lain, this is used to spread the Wired signal. A man named Masami Eri was the project director for Protocol 7, an update to the Wired by Tachibana General Labs, in which he gave himself full permissions over the Wired. Eri had fully uploaded his consciousness to the Wired, killing himself in the real world. He was enabled to become a god through worshippers known as the Knights of Eastern Calculus, a group of secretive Wired users who are motivated to merge the Wired and the real world. By the end of the story, Lain realizes she has a consciousness without form that stems from the Wired, and was given life by Eri. She uses this newfound omnipotent power over the Wired to challenge Eri, and, by luring him into the real world, ends his power as god, erasing herself from everyone's memory in order to save her friend, Alice.
Layer 0 to Lain.
Lain herself is a complex character. Throughout the show, we follow 3 different Lains: real-world Lain, Wired Lain, and Anti-Lain. These 3 Lains embody our favorite motherfucker Sigmund Freud's theory of the id, the ego, and the superego. Our first Lain is Lain or Wakara, or the Lain we see in the real world. She is a meek and timid girl whose memory was erased by the Lain first given form as to better fit in with humanity, having a fully human body to the point she bleeds. When accessing the Wired, another Lain is manifested, Lain of the Wired. This Lain is much more active and self-righteous, attempting to take down the Knights and bring justice to the Wired. Finally, there's Anti-Lain, a separate entity created by the Knights to facilitate the fusion of the Wired and the real world. As stated before, each of these represents a different part of Sigmund Freud's theory on self. Wired Lain represents the superego, as she aims for idealized perfection in the pursuit of goals, generally paired with the pursuit of justice. The id represents her unconscious desire, generally malicious such as sexual desire or pursuit of power. Anti-Lain represents ideas that Lain would never surface to herself, and only acts out of line as it becomes a separate form. The ego is the middle ground, represented by Lain of the real world, who mediates between the two. While all three of these are separate personalities, and in the case of Anti-Lain, a separate identity, I will treat them as self-aligned with Freud's theory. With the background complete, I would like to focus on the main topic of this video. While many aim to analyze Lain for its lore and meaning, I would rather like to explore one idea brought up in this series, that being the truly horrific idea of mass communication, and what can potentially arise from it. And by God, have the consequences been large. So let's get into it.
Layer 03 Communication.
In episode 4 of Serial Experiments Lain, Lain's dad offers a word of warning to Lain.
I think that my little girl perhaps has become obsessed with the Wired. It's just an advanced medium for communication. Don't ever get it confused with the real world.
While Lain disagrees, in the broad scope of the show, he isn't wrong. Every major conflict ultimately comes from communication in the Wired. Cheese's death? Communication. Eddie's God complex? Communication. The supernatural is defined by its ability to communicate at scale. The mass connectivity persists in our world. Advanced technologies to the level we have today is dystopian in concept. In an instant, we can send a message to the other side of the world to start a nuclear conflict. It's frankly terrifying. Our identities are defined by our internet presence. Our lives are documented on a platform we don't know how it operates, and the keys to this life are blocked by a password. Without it, we lose access to a part of our identity. But why do we do this? Why do we trap ourselves in a labyrinth of electricity and social media? It's exactly what Lain's dad said. Communication. To say communication is all bad would be a lie. The internet, and the communication that has come with it, has allowed for more connectedness than ever before. Lain itself shows this in episode 2, in which Lain and her friends plan a trip to Siberia through the Wired. People's thoughts and opinions are able to be expressed and spread to parts of the world unimaginable beforehand. Movements like the LGBTQ+ have been able to gain traction as messages of this being normal can spread to corners of the world when no one else is there to give support. The anonymity of the internet has given many the courage to step outside their comfort zone and mold themselves into a new identity. Someone who is shy in real life can blossom into an energetic, positive presence online and create friends they never would have otherwise. Despite this, a simple rhetoric can be applied to many of the qualms with the internet. Every action has its equal, opposite reaction. While some good ideas may be brought to light on the internet, an equal amount of negatives have a stage on the internet. With widespread anonymity, many begin to do horrible things they never would do in real life. The computer screen gives us a boost of courage unlike anything else. Communication in a mass form is a truly disturbing dystopia, where who you're talking to may begin to show their worst colors due to the anonymity. So what happens when these true colors begin to show, and how can they begin to bleed into real life? Just as Lain foretold.
Layer 04 Nuremberg Files.
What image comes to mind when you look at this man? Perhaps he reminds you of an old history teacher. Maybe you look towards his mustache and seemingly friendly demeanor. You could even see him as nothing remarkable at all. This man is Near Horsley, the operator of a website known as the Nuremberg Files. The internet first became a part of everyday life for many middle-class Americans around the mid-1990s with the dot-com boom. At the time, the most active internet browser, Netscape Navigator, hit 10 million global users in 1995. While many hate organizations hopped on right away, with white nationalists establishing the website Stormfront soon after, these websites were mostly used to facilitate ongoings. It stayed separate. This changed with the advent of doxing. Doxing, in its most primitive form, was a way for hackers to get revenge on each other. Now, it's evolved into releasing personal information online for those who wish to remain anonymous. In 1997, the Nuremberg Files went live, revolutionizing free speech on the internet. The Nuremberg Files, created by the religious extremist Neil Horsley, was a forum dedicated to releasing the personal information of over 200 doctors that provided abortions, while not explicitly telling viewers to go kill these individuals. That's exactly what happened. It was a late night in Winnipeg, Canada, when Dr. Jack Feynman, the head gynecologist at a nearby hospital, was enjoying late-night television. Before he knew it, a ripping pain soared through his shoulder. The bullet shrapnel fractured into the doctor's shoulder, causing irreparable damage to his operating arm. The gunman was never found. 1 year later, at approximately 10 p.m., Barrett Slepian, a Buffalo gynecologist, was standing in his kitchen. The dark hue at night left Slepian vulnerable. A loud crack was followed by a thump on the ground, as the former abortionist fell to the ground as his body went limp. His gunman, James Kopp, was convicted for this murder, as well as suspected for the murder of Jack Feynman. The common thread between these two? Their information was out in the open, on the Nuremberg Files. On January 8, 1999, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals was scheduled for an appeal on the behalf of Planned Parenthood in their suit against the American Coalition of Life Activists. They were granted audience under the condition of newfound deaths of multiple victims whose names appeared on a website known as the Nuremberg Files, who was linked to the American Coalition of Life Activists. After court deliberation, Planned Parenthood was awarded $100 million for damages. However, ruled that the Nuremberg Files could not be shut down under the terms of free speech. This case reveals the true horror of mass communication. With connectivity, hate messages can spread farther than ever before. A man in Georgia can create a site to influence someone in New York to kill multiple people. The anonymity of these forums gives courage to people to begin this in the first place. We can hide behind an air of anonymity to spread hate and successfully hide. Neil Horsley was never convicted for anything. Even further, he ran for governor in 2010.
So in editing, I did some more research. Turns out he was charged for terrorist threats against Elton John, but those charges were dropped. Additionally, he tried to run for governor to secede from the Union and admitted multiple times to bestiality. Yeah.
There's no way to regulate the internet. A wave of free speech can get many people safely deemed innocent under the eyes of our court, and mass regulation will never be possible without heavy censorship. So, do we dismantle what we have, or let it mutate as it is now? It's a question we can never fully answer. However, a man across the world from these murders thought of the same idea. A man named Chiaki J. Konaka. In episode 8 of Serial Experiments Lain, we see Lain come face to face with a version of herself known as Auntie Lain. Auntie Lain uses the wire to spread a rumor of an affair between her best friend Alice and her teacher. With everyone connected to the wired, no one would miss this rumor. Lain enters the wire to confront this Auntie Lain, and the following exchange occurs.
You're not me. There's just no way. I'd never do the kind of things that you've been doing. Oh, spare me. Just stop it. Why are you acting like the part of me that I hate?
This is a stark contrast from the Lain we know from the rest of the series. She admits her malicious thoughts and actions are part of Lain's consciousness but not acted upon, but are drawn out by the anonymity of being in the virtual world. While Auntie Lain herself may be a manifestation brought upon by an external source, it seems that the actions she performs aren't far from a Lain without a moral compass. This idea is a scary mimicry of future events when it comes to being online. We see celebrities with carefully crafted facades that act as nothing but a ploy to sell merchandise. We see teenagers acting in incredibly stupid fashions as the internet acts as an echo chamber for any idea. This is corroborated by communities sprung up around zoophilia who genuinely believe they are right in their action. And we also see the blending of the real world and virtual worlds, as the Nuremberg files themselves show. Our worlds only increase in connection with each other every day, as we slowly find ourselves melting into the sci-fi world thought up by a Japanese man. A major recurring story in Lain is the idea of a god that is formed within the Wired. In episode 8 of Lain, Lain of the Wired confronts this voice of God, who claims that he is an all-powerful being of the Wired, given power in the belief by the Knights of the Eastern Calculus. A cult formed within the Wired that affects the goings-on of a world outside of its reach seems ridiculous, until you realize that these very same ideas prop up everywhere, under our own noses. Cyber sectarianism is the phenomenon of religious movements who spread their ideologies through the internet. Anti-Communist Party China movements such as those of the Falun Gong have used the internet to spread messages that would otherwise result in their deaths. Coordinated attacks on public safety through cyber terrorist attacks have become more and more common every year. 2022's anonymous attacks on Russian computer systems was a recent famous example of this phenomenon. But it's not reserved to recent big events. Al-Qaeda still persists, using the internet to plan terrorist attacks. Similarly, ALF, the Japanese doomsday cult responsible for the Tokyo subway sarin attacks of 1995, uses the internet to carry out terrorist attacks. Even going back to 1997, the Heaven's Gate cult, many theorize it could be considered cyber sectarianism due to its use of CMS messaging systems to communicate. And the worst part is, Lain predicted this outcome. An anime being able to foresee the natural extremes of a mass-connected world made us think if we should have stopped. And the natural answer is no. Despite the bad that's come out of this, it's undoubtedly affected the world positively. However, it makes us reflect upon if any more advancements are good. Will the media warning about AI age like fine wine in 20 years? Or will it become another wacky sci-fi concept that never went anywhere? It's hard to say, but we have to further examine where we are now to make an informed decision. And it doesn't take long to find sickening activity.
Layer 05 SS.
As previously mentioned, episode 1 of Lain opens with a woman named Chisa Yomoda jumping off a building in the heart of Tokyo, with text flashing upon the screen stating, "I don't need to stay in a place like this." Later in the same episode, Lain receives an email from the post-mortem Chisa telling Lain to join her in dedicating herself to the Wired. We find out later in the series, these messages most likely came from Eddie, who himself committed suicide to become one with the Wired. However, this exposes a hidden truth within it, because in basic terms, someone was persuaded to suicide through the Wired, a practice that's become reality for many. With 4 clicks of your mouse and the right search term, you can stumble upon a website dedicated to persuading users into suicide. I will call it SS, so as not to spread its name. This website is dedicated to the concept of suicide, but rather than for support, they're firm believers in killing yourself. On one forum in which someone details their plan to commit suicide that night, the replies on the post aren't anything telling them to get help, rather wishing them good luck and complimenting their bravery. This thread is sickening. For all I know, this man is now dead, and everyone around him in his final moments pushed him to do it. This website was majorly brought to attention due to a video by fellow YouTuber Tantacruel, in which he goes into far more depth than I can, but it's worth checking out to get the full details. The state of the website after the video is interesting, to say the least. The stance towards getting help on the website has always been extreme. Many believe that getting help is a restriction of rights. According to the site's official beliefs, the choice of life or death is within the hands of an individual, and those who restrict rights are evil. This is seen in many users as well, such as comments stating, She urged me very desperately to get help, and I think she's going to distance herself from me unless I do so. Showing how many see getting help as something willing to lose a friend over, preferring suicide as an option. The ironic part being, this very poster had a Lain icon. Furthermore, this viewpoint has only become more harsh after the video came out. One post stated that those who tell people to get help are rats and Tantacruel's lackeys who don't understand their struggles. While it may be true in some sense, pushing further into a mindset where help doesn't exist is dangerous. Many of the members have fallen into confirmation bias, in which after people tell them that they're wrong, they further fall into their beliefs that people are trying to take away their freedoms.
More crusty mic editing. Looking further on the website, there is people who feel shame that they don't feel suicidal because they have reasons to keep going, such as playing games. And people on this website have basically been lured into the idea that this is the only way out, and anything else is shameful.
These websites persist on the internet, and there's an endless amount like this that can exist, outside of the popularity and attention this one has received. These websites prove the danger of mass communication, because any idea, no matter how taboo or dangerous, can be accessed with 4 clicks in a keyboard. The internet is a dangerous place, but it's ultimately escapable, at least for the moment. After all, many ideas of cyborgs remain in human fear and conception, right? The true sci-fi aspect of Lain, outside of an alien showing up, is Lain's slow transformation into a hybrid between man and machine, hooking herself up to the computer to further progress her plunge into the wired, an idea eerily similar to an ideology that has progressively gained traction in social consciousness, that idea being transhumanism.
Layer 06 Transhumanism.
Transhumanism is a philosophical idea advocating for the advancement of human condition through technological advancements such as AI or nanotechnology. The idea of transhumanism isn't new, with basic ideas progressing the human condition through science dating back to 1923, with the term itself being coined in 1957. Transhumanistic aims can be best summarized from a quote by a 1985 magazine known as Byte. You awake one morning to find your brain has another lobe functioning. Invisible, this auxiliary lobe answers your questions with information beyond the realm of your own memory, suggests plausible courses of action, and asks questions that help bring out relevant facts. You quickly come to rely on this new lobe so much that you stop wondering how it works. You just use it. This is the dream of artificial intelligence. This sentiment has been committed to public consciousness, as many defend the use of AI in art and other forms of artistic expression to be used to filter ideas or create something a human cannot. Elon Musk, proponent of his form of transhumanism, Neuralink, claims that this technology will be able to rewire brains to help paraplegics walk again, or those with memory issues to have increased capacity to remember. Whether transhumanistic ideas be good or bad, well, only time will tell. But the more we begin to approach it, the more it begins to look like Lain. The nice wannabe who walks around Shibuya with a headset on is slowly progressing into the technology we have today, with cameraless VR being available through means such as the Oculus Rift 2. In the writing of this script alone, Apple's Vision OS creeps closer to public augmented reality. How long will it be until the line between the internet and the real world becomes blurred, just like it did in Lain? Impersonation is already much easier, with Twitter certifications becoming a marketable commodity, with the initial boom causing Eli Lilly's stock to fall after being impersonated online. However, that one is totally deserved. But even then, that good continues with the dialogue, showing that it may not be all bad. It's terrifying to think of how our world will progress with the technology we have, and maybe Lain can teach us something. Serial Experiments Lain has stuck in my mind more than any anime, and has aged like fine wine. It's a cautionary tale of what will happen when communication advances, and it's ultimately left up to us to figure out what to do. Will further advancements be worth the opposite reaction from the good things that will happen? In the end, we still have our voice. We can always protest, make noise, make our opinions seen. Putting restrictions on the internet is hard, but not impossible. The video by Tantacruel includes a call to action to those who feel strongly about taking down SS, and there is pending legislation to do so. And at the end, we can always log off, escape from our digital world and experience the outside world, which is possible. It's not like a hum follows many people around the world, like in Lain, right?